because your body is not built to stay here for a long period of time. It's meant to be short. You know, you have that burst and then you come back down to your low beta state. Hi friends, Michael here, author of A Warrior's Mindset, founder of Next Wave Warrior, and excited to be here with you today for another episode of Warrior Living TV. Today we are talking about 2 things you need to know about your brain wave state. So if you've ever saw these little lines within like we usually think of that as the heartbeat, right? So these monitors would actually be able to measure our beats per minute on the I don't know this machine for measuring the heart rate, but there is a similar one that's able to measure your brain wave state, and that one's called an electroencephalogram, right? It moves up and down and it gives us an indicator as to the activity in your brain. So have you ever wondered how that will represent various areas of functioning in your brain? Well, we've been able to break down the different components to see just how your brain operates and what states and levels it moves through, and the different associations within those states. So what we're covering today is the 2 things that you need to know about your brainwave state. 2 things that are going to get you really understanding where you operate from at a physiological level. Because when you get in tune with the physiological being of yourself, that's just really more scientific understanding to know how you're living, how your emotions are affecting you, how the results are affecting you, and how really you are operating from a place of low performance in your life. And so, right, warrior living is all about enhancing yourself to be the best version of you that shows up for your family, for your loved ones. And so today what we're going to cover is really the things that you need to know with understanding that brainwave state, because at the end of the day, you are an operating being. You are an electrical being. I always like to reference this metaphor, but if you were ever to go up to someone and you were to find them unconscious, first thing that paramedics are trained to do is to check the pulse, right? Check the pulse and see if there's any pulse. And immediately, if there's no pulse, what is the next thing that they do? Right? They bring out these machines, the defibrillator, and they put them on the chest. And do you ever know what comes out of a defibrillator? What is that thing? A charge, an electric charge, electricity. Now, why would they be shocking electricity into this thing that is really a bag of bones, the body? Because at some level we are electrical beings. We're really hardwired to have electrical currents running through ourselves, right? And so we can conduct electricity within ourselves, and we actually have a frequency and a voltage, a very low voltage rate, but that's a part of who we are as these walking, breathing, living creatures. So really fascinating to understand that you are a bioelectromagnetic being, right? The bio, the living part, the electrical part of you, and the magnetic, that means you're always attracting different things based on this level of frequency, vibration. And so it gets very deep in there. That's time for another discussion. But what today we're talking about is the being state of your brain waves. So what I want to show you is first the breakdown of what we have here, which is the basic brainwave level states. And so how I like to break this down is into a little acronym that says BAT, dog. And that's typically how we break down the wave states. And so we have what we call beta. Now I'm going to separate that. We have beta, and then we have alpha. Separate that. We have theta, delta, gamma. So this is how we break down the states, right? And if you were to guess, which level would you be at if you're consciously listening to this video, if you're consciously being aware of this video and understanding the principles that I'm teaching? What level do you think is the awake and learning state, right? The conscious state. Right here, beta. And this is where we move from, you know, every day we move up and down these different brainwave states. And so if you're asleep, right, we have down here in delta. So we move through that or a sleep state. And when we move up to the wake state, the actual us being up is wake. So moving up from delta all the way up to beta, and then transitioning through this. We do this every night and every morning. It is the natural rhythm of your body and how you move through the sleep state to the awake state. And so what does this have to tell us about ourselves and our performance? Well, I want to focus right here, right now, in the beta state. So beta is, our awake state. And if you have been experiencing anxiety, worry, where your mind's just mentally activated on something that you really have trouble going back into the delta natural state for sleep, right? You struggle with falling asleep, if you have struggle with staying asleep, right? There's different things going on within your body that are affecting that. But when we look at our beta state and we're looking at how we are being awake, usually how most people in the United States, Americans, are being awake is in this, what we call the high beta. I'm going to break these two down. There's a high and then there's a low. And they all each have different components to it. High beta state is the intense anxiety, worry, heightened emotions, right? Heightened emotions. And we experience these heightened emotions for a reason. These are physiologically, evolutionarily trained within us, because it's mechanically in us for a reason. If we were back in the time of our early ancestors, right, we'd be see a snake or see a tiger or something, what would initiate? A shot of adrenaline, a fight or flight response would go in you. It would get you moving, right? It will get you moving faster than you could believe, right? And so that high beta state, which is when we're awake, is what we tend to stay in. And what's natural about this rhythm is you'll peak, you'll go really high, and then you'll eventually come down to okay, I got safety, and I can take a breath, and I can be all right. And this is all controlled by thought, right? Thought is the perception of the environment around you, and then that initiates the body's responses. Sometimes thought is so subconscious that you can't even consciously process what you're thinking, because your body's just reacting. You think your body's just reacting, but there's also that subconscious part of you that's responsible for this. So we look at the high and then go back down to low. When we pop back up into eventually operating from here again, it's calm, collected. However, if you have been a person, or maybe you just know someone who's just constantly worried, anxious, right, just on nerve, just have a life full of other emotions that don't contribute to their wellness or their well-being, they're operating in a high beta state. We could actually take a little machine called an electroencephalograph. I don't even know how to spell that, but electroencephalograph, right? To be able to measure the brainwave states. You could hook up some monitors onto your brain and actually look at how you are thinking, right? And this, they've been measured in many research studies, but show that in a high beta state, most Americans, just with the inability to create internal resolve or to have strategies to bring themselves back down to a low beta state, most people will stay in this high beta state. And what I mean, imagine if it's increased testosterone, increased adrenaline, I mean, these increased emotions, right? The physiological, the chemicals that are needed to put your body in that heightened state. If you stay up here, we tend to see deterioration of the body. We tend to see susceptibility to disease. We tend to see various emotions kind of playing out at this high level, because your body is not built to stay here for a long period of time. It's meant to be short. You know, you have that burst and then you come back down to your low beta state. People who we find staying up in this state, you know, have the symptoms to tell that, well, you know, that way of thinking is really affecting their body. It's affecting their way of life. And so, you know, just specifically about the beta state, when you can incorporate practices, right? Practices to help bring your thinking, your brainwave state down to a lower level, you have enacted the natural, you know, movement of your body, the natural cycle of your body. And so when you move back down to this low state, guess what happens? You then get resolve. Your body then begins to replenish and restore the various chemicals that it used, right? If your body's, you know, functioning with neurotransmitters all throughout the body, you know, through these chemical synapses shooting different different chemical reactions, you know, happening at that microscopic level, then in the low beta state, you know, you're able actually to replenish and recharge the batteries. And so going down into a sleep state, which would be down here, and then, you know, going back up here. When we go back down here, you know, this is where we think of recharge. Really the body's ability to recharge in this low state of delta. So being able to really understand this has so much power for you, because when we can step into intentionally knowing, am I at high beta right now? If I am, I better prepare to have a strategy to bring myself down to a low beta, because research, everything, studies have shown, scientists have shown that staying in a high beta state increases your susceptibility and chances for, immunity, you know, decrease, right? You're more susceptible to the things, the illnesses, diseases, your body breaks down, all kind of inflammation that, you know, peaks up. And so being able to, again, stay at this high beta state really affects who we are being at that moment. Whereas our low beta state, right? And this, you know, if you look at kids with learning, right? Kids with learning, if you look at students who are in ADD, ADHD states, when we look at electroencephalogram, we're able to see that in here, they're operating at a high beta state. Their concentration, their focus, their thought patterns are just constantly jumping from here to there, and it's like on edge, on anxiety. And, you know, the different things that can influence this, can be food, can be, you know, sugar intake, can be, you know, amount of exercise. It's really all the natural things that our body really needs to function well. And, you know, maybe a kid isn't getting that. And so we do see those high movements at that, you know, high beta level. Whereas when we see kids who are functioning very well, performing very well in their classes and their studies and overall in their learning and their, you know, way of life, they have been able to maintain a low beta state while they're awake, right? That means they've conditioned, they trained, they've learned to respond to the environment in a way that keeps their cool, or were able to heighten their emotions for a short period of time, then come back down, right? If, you know, if we're just looking through these durations or these jumps in duration, right? If somebody comes up here and they have a long time up here, you know, hour plus, you know, we know that, you know, they've pretty much trained themselves how to stay up there. Whereas another person can come up and then within 10 minutes, you know, stay up here. And so, you know, for things like with parenting with kids, if you're working with a kid, you want to train them to be able to come back down, after they process, right? That natural emotion of being angry, of being upset is natural within our body. It's not something that we have to deny, but it's something that we can train ourselves not to stay so high within and not to stay up there, but to eventually come down. If you see, people who really work with anxiety and have this severe panic attacks, they can stay up here for a long period of time focusing on that thing that they're afraid of, with the intense fixation. But if we're able to come down within a shorter period of time, shortening that period, you enhance yourself. You really enhance the quality of your life, because you're retraining, you're reconditioning your body to respond in a very different way. So I think that kind of really explains to you, just the one thing that you should know about your brainwave state is, am I in a high beta state? Can I plug in, if I take these imaginary and electroencephalogram, put it to my head, would it show me operating at a high level? Okay, if a yes, that's good insight for me. Now I got to enact a strategy, a tool, a mechanism, a way for me to bring that down, right? And what are some of those mechanisms? Breathing, right? Breathing is an intentional function of the body where you intentionally breathe in and breathe out in a very intentional way, where you're holding the breath, where you're intention and breath can scientifically show that we can, how do you change an electroencephalogram? Simply by using your breath. This amazing thing called breath, to be able to change the intensity and change the duration, change how you are breathing, can significantly impact the way, just teaching a child a breathing technique or an attention technique, right? There's another technique we call the Hakalau state. And this Hakalau state is something that I learned in the field of neuro-linguistic programming. And from one of my coaches, that I learned this from, is to, Hakalau translates into a word in the Hawaiian language, which means, just like this state of happiness. It's a party in your head. It's intense, just a feeling. And, the ancient Hunas would actually try to be and require and stay in this state for long period of time, and they spend almost their entire life to try to be able to stay in this state, when really the state of Hakalau is really about taking your attention, right? Taking your attention, we mostly have an internal use of our attention, but being able to put your attention outside of you. That means you are increasing the awareness of what's around you, what we call the peripheral vision, right? The peripheral state of our being, when we can actually intentionally stay in a peripheral experience of life. We have stepped into a Hakalau state, we have stepped into a low beta state, and we have really increased our ability to be able to bring in more information and to respond in a more enhanced way. So, just teaching that simple technique to ADD, ADHD students have, really in the number of studies have been able to improve their performance in school, their self-control, and it's really one thing that you can use to condition, right? And we tend to stay in this thinking that there's going to be that one fix, that one thing, but really the mind is a conditioning factor. Being able to condition it for various things. Change can happen like that, but then again, we want to reinforce it with the conditioning to make sure that we are getting the results that we want. So that's what I want to share with you. The two things that you need to know about your brainwave state is you operate from beta when you're in awake. You operate from a high and a low state. Your high is someplace you don't want to stay for a long period of time. You want to train yourself to come down within a shorter duration of time. And delta is your sleep state, where you're recharging. And meditation is happening in the alpha. Meditation, various ways of just being open, mental clarity is happening down here. And so, Buddhist, anybody who has this practice, their intention is to go from beta into alpha into, even theta is like a almost sleep state, right? Hypnosis happens down here, right? And the thing about your conscious mind is awake up here, subconscious mind, and if you've ever heard that the subconscious is the most powerful part of yourself, it would make sense that you want to go down into this level to explore and to intentionally make changes and shifts down here, because it'll affect the conscious state of you. So being able to understand that is for another episode, but I'd like to thank you for being here today. And remember, this is information to help you grow beyond your circumstances. Thank you. Have a great day.